Okay. Aloha. What's up? Welcome to the spoiler full review of him. A couple friends of mine saw it. They hated it. So that was interesting. I did warn them, and I did say, look, Rumi, last time we went to the movies together, you said that I'm not picking the movie, the next one. So I did strongly recommend, or not strongly recommend, but I did say, you're going out with your friend to see a movie today. I'm kind of surprised you didn't pick The Long Walk. I've heard a lot of good things about The Long Walk. They saw him and came back and were angry at me. Like, that was terrible. Like, I mean, I really liked it. I don't know what to tell you. There's this story that Marlon Wayans talks about, where he talks about ancient civilizations. They would grab the men would grab their male children from the moms, take them somewhere, cut up their, mutilate them, sew them back together, and then make them drink the blood of the elder warriors, because they were trying to pass on, literally genetically, the skills of the elder warrior. Now, there's some basis in science for this. Number one, people who get organ transplants, someone gets a liver or a spleen or something from someone who's a smoker, a non-smoker gets a organ from a smoker, the non-smoker will suddenly instinctively start smoking cigarettes. We already know animals naturally pass on their information from one generation to the next. That's why their instincts are so keen. That's why they start off right off the bat. But what's the other element of this? But also, this isn't the first time I've heard this story. I started reading maybe more than a couple years ago now. I started reading Joseph Campbell's Hero with a Thousand Faces so I could study Star Wars and have a better handle on it, because I came to a revelation that for a while there, I was just on the hate the prequel thing, except I never agreed with Phantom Menace being bad. But, the prequel hate, I was all about that. In a way, I think it was sort of a fun thing to be a part of, this weird hate bandwagon for these movies. But, time passed. I saw them again. I was like, wait a minute. I'm kind of really engaged with this movie. These movies have something about them that's actually, it reminds me of my childhood. It reminds me of things I enjoyed as a kid that I don't really watch anymore, but it's in that format that I like, which is live action. And Attack of the Clones used to be the movie that I hated the most. And I legitimately hated that movie when I first saw it, which kind of tainted my appreciation for Revenge of the Sith, although I enjoyed that as well. I just came to the revelation years later, knowing everything I know about movies. I'm like, wait a minute. Actually, these movies are brilliant. There's something genius about all these movies that's not being appreciated. So I started reading A Hero with a Thousand Faces, and I got his other book too, because George Lucas had studied Joseph Campbell's work and got to know the guy in order to develop the story for Star Wars. George Lucas is an anthropologist. He studies societies across time, and so it makes sense that this book would be something he read, and the author would be someone he would get to know in order to fully understand how to tell a story competently, what societies around the world really appreciate, and that's something that made me read the book. However, I must say, the first 150 pages, I wouldn't say I blew through, but they were so fascinating because it was so well-rounded. There were so many cultures that Joseph Campbell talked about, And then the next 150 pages were so dense, and there was a lot of redundancies, but they weren't redundancies. They were redundancies because he was exploring a different aspect of the culture story that he hadn't talked about, but he's talking about it now in a different light as he progresses through the journey of a hero, or just the journey of any person through their culture, from birth to trials of life to either achieving nirvana or revelation, or getting tools from the gods. So it's a brilliant book to read, and it's way over my head. But I stopped reading it at the point where they were discussing indigenous cultures that would grab the boys, take them from their mothers, and sometimes it was even performative where the mothers were just kind of pretending to hang on to the boys, but they knew they had to be taken away, and then they would be mutilated. There would be the sharing of the blood of the older male, and for that exact intention to pass on genetically through the blood the memories and skills of how to do things. So like that's fascinating. And having just watched Midnight Mass, where they really get into the notion of the passing of the blood from the vampire, because it's a Nosferatu story, spoiler alert, the passing of the blood from the vampire to his bite victim is what gets them to become a vampire as well. So there are historical notions of the powers of blood transfer. And the fact of the matter is that it is revealed across this movie that all these little injections that our main character has been getting, I thought it was steroids or some kind of just medication to help him just focus and relax or whatever it may be. And it's kind of revealed, without explaining it too thoroughly, that those injections were little samples of blood from the Marlon Wayans character. I'm sorry, it's been a minute since I recorded my review, so I've forgotten both characters' names. But I just thought that's a fascinating element that this movie dips into. And granted, if you don't know, you don't know, and it doesn't help to not know. I think it may have been useful to audience members to explain some of this stuff somewhere in the movie if it felt natural. And maybe they did. We don't know. Maybe they did, and it did not feel natural. And I remember my roommate had said, nothing from the trailer was in the movie. And she was also referring to the Jesus pose when he's covered in blood, which again, I think should have still been in the movie. I think it was such an epic trailer moment. Unless it's an alternate scene or a deleted scene, or it is one of those flash cuts, I do think it should have kept that in the movie. But either way, there's all these flash cuts that I realized in talking to my roommate. It's like, wait a minute, most of the stuff that's in the trailer is in the movie. It's just cut like it is in the trailer. And I wouldn't say it's literally trailer editing. It's the movie. This is the movie's voice. This is the movie's editing voice. And I'm fine with it, because that's how my brain works. My brain works kinetically. My brain works non-linear, completely non-linear. That's why I can follow a movie like Memento and not be like, screw this. I can follow Memento. I can follow movies that have storylines that are kind of, I wouldn't say all over the place, but they're broken apart, and going in different directions. I mean, most people can, but it definitely, in the case like him, things like him don't bother me, or even talk about editing choices. The first Suicide Squad. Granted, we know now that the movie was taken from the director, as studios like to do, and we'll never know what the real vision of that movie was because of how the studio decided to make it the way they felt it needed to be made. But that was another one where I had no problem with how that movie came out. I'm like, because in my mind, yeah, the music's changing and it's a lot of fast editing, but at the same time, I'm like, well, it's kind of like a trailer. Like the movie's kind of having the personality of a trailer because of this editing style. And granted, it's not winning anyone over for the majority of the audience, but I was kind of entertained by it. I was like, I would call it more, in the case of Suicide Squad, I would call it an editing experiment, since it's not what the director wanted. But as an editing experiment, I thought this is kind of fun. It's like, yeah, they're changing the song every 5 seconds, but there have been movies where they change the song every time they introduce a character. It's not the first time it's been done. It's just, is it the most effective way? Apparently not. But so, and bring it back to him, I'm like, this is clearly intentional this time. This time around, they want to leave the audience wondering. They want the audience to, I wouldn't say, I don't know if it's exactly decide for yourself, but they want to leave the audience with these lingering curiosities about what may or may not have happened in the movie. I wonder if maybe they even want you to think, is all of it just something that's in his mind? Because I still think at the start of the movie, when they show him throwing the footballs at the goal, and he hits both goalposts, we do see the goalposts shake. And in my mind, I know that as a recurring image, the shaking of objects means that there is a demonic presence. But on the other hand, I also felt like this also could mean that maybe there was something broken in the goalpost. Maybe it shattered at some point and it fell on the guy. And in his mind, as he's dying, he has this entire fantasy of what it must be like to work with the greatest of them all. But it's like a hellish dream experience that he's having as opposed to reality. So that was just my thought, and it would not make me happier to find out that was the truth. It's just a thought that I had thinking about the movie. I'm like, from the moment that he sees the football spinning, I thought, is this real or not? I think it's because it evokes, that's very much imagery from Inception, right? We have the dreidel spinning, or whatever that thing is. We have the little thing spinning, and when it spins and doesn't fall over, we know we're in a dream. So I couldn't help but wonder, is the filmmaker telling us something right now, that in fact something terrible happened to this guy, and everything we're experiencing is just him dying, with this major brain injury, and that he really was attacked by some crazy mascot guy, or who knows what it is. But all the shaking, all that stuff, it's very indicative of brain damage. It's very indicative of some kind of malfunction of perception. I think it's equally indicative of all that stuff. So I feel like, to me, the movie, by leaving out a lot of answers, even though I would say the ending is pretty clear about what's going on, I'd say the movie, because it's kind of experimental and makes these choices, I get the feeling that for the audience, it kind of wants the audience to make a choice. It's like, kind of choose your own answer, I think, is what the movie is kind of saying. This is like, the movie's presenting, this is about sacrifice, and literally the sacrifice of fans. It doesn't matter if they love you, you can hurt them. The sacrifice of yourself, first of all. It doesn't matter how much you hurt yourself, as long as you keep going and keep trying to achieve greatness. And then finally, at the end of the movie, the sacrifice of your soul. To me, this is all can be explained with the scene, the shooting scene, which I do think it's still kind of a mislead because you think guns will come back by the end of the movie. I feel like when they're shooting, they're taking shots at helmets and stuff, and then there's clearly a body inside of a mascot that they're shooting at. And Marlon Wayans makes a deal with the Tyriq Withers character and says, "Okay, you make this shot, you can have everything." And Tyriq tells him, "No, I like to earn my stuff." And his ego comes out and says, "How about this? If I make the shot, maybe I'll let you be quarterback one more year." And Marlon Wayans, you can see he's really offended by that, because in a way he's gotten an ego now that he's sort of been pumped up and all this stuff. Now his protege has developed this ego where he thinks he can talk about him as if it's already over, and as if he's already in the place that he's being primed to go to. And sort of it's a sort of a pupil disrespecting the master type of situation. When they are in that final battle and the helmet glows and we go back into that sort of x-ray vision of them fighting each other, it's so visceral. And even though maybe for the regular audience they may not like that, I don't know, for me I thought, okay, we're going back to that training moment where Tyriq hit the other player so hard that you watch his head jiggle and rock, except now it's Tyriq versus Marlon Wayans, and they're both people who have had their heads rocked so hard that they have glitches, that they have issues. And it's sort of like the sacrificial lambs are duking it out for who's dying today, who's willing to sacrifice body and soul. And I would say even the ego is like, even giving into the ego is a form of giving up your soul, because you're giving up your values in order to talk about how great you are compared to someone else, and of all people, your trainer. Although, to be fair, and not that any of it's fair, Marlon Wayans has been grooming him very quickly and unsubtly to accept the pain, suffering, and sacrifice of other people in order to maintain his own strength. And we know with the Greek gods, or with all the gods from the ancient times, the whole notion of sacrificing someone, that you sacrifice a person or an animal, and that sacrifice, it powers the gods, or in doing so, it's what keeps the gods with their dominion over man. So at least that's what a lot of Hercules' legendary journeys was about, busting up everything so that the gods couldn't have their sacrifices. But yeah, so I feel on the small spectrum, sacrificing, and I mean this relatively, obviously, sacrificing the fan players or the other players so that the quarterback can maintain his power. The sacrifice of the smaller player gives power to the quarterback. And on the larger scale, the sacrifice of the soul of the quarterback keeps the god having his power over man. What also struck me about the ending of the movie is that I had recently started watching the amazing Eyes Wide Shut. Now, unfortunately, the DVD that I had zipped out when the movie really got interesting, around like the 25-minute mark, when Tom Cruise finally enters this secret society. And in that secret society, at first you don't realize it. Everyone's wearing these masks and they're in robes and stuff. and it seems like it's just a really kinky sex club. And then all of a sudden, right when the DVD ran out, Tom Cruise is sort of, everyone realizes he's not supposed to be there, and then he's confronted by everyone, and all of a sudden when you see the people that seem to be in charge, their masks are much more animalistic, they look kind of demonic. There is a sense that this secret society is up to more than just fooling around for fun. And that's when the DVD cut out. But just the fact that we got there, and I was like, what's going to happen to Tom Cruise? There's 2 hours of this movie left. What's going to happen? And then the DVD buzzed out. But just that I got that little taste, and then to get to the ending of him, I drew an immediate connection. Like, it's all the same. It's like there's some kind of sacrifice of morality and of the values of your soul that's going on in this secret society that is clearly this sacrifice is powering or supposed to draw power from some other entity that is not necessarily coming from the better part of our angels. You know what I mean? So all these connections in my head made a lot of sense. And it's just the kind of movie, to me, it's like, if you know, you know. And that's the kind of movie it is. And then again, as I already said, I'm okay with that. I'm 100% okay with that. Ever since my teacher humbling me in screenwriting class when I said Babel's not a good movie, and then he asked me, you know, I'm like, arrogant 18, 19-year-old. Yeah, Babel sucks. Oh, really? My teacher says, do you know the story of Babel? Yeah, it's about, people building a tower, and then the gods strike the tower down and make sure everyone speaks different languages so they can never build a tower to heaven again. And he went, oh, great. So what's the movie Babel about? It's about people who can't communicate, who have to learn how to communicate in order to help out each other. I was like, oh, okay. And that's all he said. And like, man, that was brilliant, because he didn't demean me. He didn't talk down to me. He just asked me questions and humbled me without condescending to me. He just got me to get it. And I was like, dang, dude. So ever since then, when I see a movie that doesn't make that much sense to me, I try not, well, not really ever since then. It took a few years for that lesson to really sink into me. But ever since the lesson really sank into my head, I really started to ask myself, just because you don't necessarily like what you're seeing or you don't know what's going on, that doesn't necessarily mean that the filmmaker is screwing up. Because much like 2001: A Space Odyssey, I think that movie gets away with being such a fantastic visual experience. But truth be told, when you get to the end of that movie, none of it makes any sense. I mean, you kind of understand through the experience of what you're watching what's going on, but you really don't get it, right? And I think because of that, it's made me appreciate other movies like, okay, and I just try to ask questions first before I determine it's a bad movie. I mean, if a movie's really bad, like Argyle, I'm sorry, I love your movies, but Argyle's not great. If some movies are just blatantly bad and there's no looking into it. But other movies, if you can tell that they know what they're doing, that they have a control over cinema, that the story is moving along and you're following the emotional beats of the characters, if everything in the movie is on a technical level telling you the story and you can follow that, but then it does weird choices, I ask myself, why'd you make those choices? And I try to have that answer before I make these videos. So that's just where I'm coming from, because again, I know people didn't like Joker 2, I know people didn't like Megalopolis, and like I'm still a regular guy. I can enjoy Dark Knight and I can enjoy Zoolander. You know what I mean? I can enjoy something that's really smart and brilliant, and at the same time enjoy something that's deliberately very silly and like unnecessary. I can handle both, but I can handle watching The Dark Knight, and thanks to great movie reviewers like Comic Book Girl 19, now Danica 19, who explain the X-Men and explain Dark Knight Rises, thanks to people like that, I can go, oh, the symbolism of this movie is telling a whole nother level of storytelling. And granted, if you are just watching just to watch, you're not going to see these things. But once you see them, once you recognize the story that's within the story, that's just being put there visually, all of a sudden you're watching a very different movie from what you thought you were watching before. So that's just where I'm coming from in my appreciation of this movie. So, yeah, those are my final thoughts for him. If you liked it or hated it, please let me know in the comments. If anything I said was useful to you in looking at the movie differently, also please let me know. If you have some insights, if you have like some specific things like, I know what this movie's talking about during this scene, I would love to know your insights. Please, always, any video you watch of mine, if you're seeing me talk about something and I didn't cover something that you're like, no, 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 I saw this interview, or I specifically study this thing and the movie's talking about this, hey, please chime in the comments. I love insights. I'm all about having those kind of deeper conversations about movies that can give you a different perspective, or another point of view on something that, hell, even if I didn't like the movie, if you want to sit there and leave a comment saying, no, 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 you don't understand, Megan 2 was made for kids, it wasn't actually made for the same audience because kids like it, please tell me that stuff. I would be happy to know. You know, as long as you're respectful, you know, I'll be happy to take those comments. And you never know, if you say something really smart, maybe I'll share it in a video or something like that. So I'm all for participate with me. I want to get deep. I want to talk to people who like talking deeply about things and love getting into the deeper meanings and knowledge of things. Please share your insights if you've got something that you really feel like no one gets this movie, especially that, because if there's something I didn't understand and you can explain it, please do. You know, no one gets this movie. This one scene explains it all. You know what I mean? Please share that. And especially filmmakers. If you're a filmmaker and you're seeing my review, and I'm sorry if I'm not saying nice things about your movie, but if you're one of the filmmakers who worked on the movie and you see my review, please share your insight, your experience on the project. You know, I would just love to hear from you. I'm not doing interviews right now, but I think if I did do an interview, that might be something I would want to find out about. Just, hey, what's the inside scoop on this movie? And I'm talking like anybody. If all you did was deliver donuts and you're like, yeah, you know, Marlon Wayans is kind of weird that day, you know, I mean, that's fine. But you know, then he sat me down and explained like this scene's about this. That's cool. But seriously, I open the floor of the comments, especially to insight and people just looking to understand movies better, or just discuss the deeper values or meanings that's about the movie. I open the floor for that. Please let me know. Thank you very much if you made it this far. Other movie nerds, dorks, and weirdos, mahalo and aloha, and I hope to see you next time.